everyone, welcome back to the studio. Today we're diving into white flowers, one of watercolor's beautiful little paradoxes. Since we don't actually use white paint, we have to let the paper do the work. So I'm going to show you 3 different techniques for painting white flowers with watercolor. Let's get into it. For our first technique, we're going to be using the negative painting. And sometimes you'll hear it referred to as negative edge painting. And I've done a preliminary sketch here of the flowers we're going to do for each method. So here we're going to start with our negative painting using anemones. So I've just done super loose outline here because we need a little bit of a guide to help us. And as I showed you with the colors, we're going to start with the neutrals here. So there's 2 ways to accomplish the negative painting. You can just go in wet on dry technique and paint the edge. So I'll show you a little bit of that. But I also want to show you what I think is pretty effective for a lot of different works if you're using backgrounds. And that is you paint the area in water, avoiding your subject. And with watercolor, the paints will only follow the water. So I'm just using clean water here, and I'm just going in, and it doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay. In fact, it's kind of nice when some of the edges slip into the background. It kind of integrates it. I like to do some of that in my work. But up here at the top, I've just added clean water. And so now I'm just going to pick any kind of neutral. I don't really want it to be a big part of the story. And as I just dab in some of the pigment, it's going to naturally flow around the flowers. If I were to tilt the board, you'd see that that paint, let me see if I can do that for you. It's not going to run. Wasn't a great example, but it doesn't move into the dry area, so you can feel confident that whatever you're painting here, it's going to stick with just the wet areas. And I like to go a little heavier with the pigment close to the edges. And then it kind of diffuses out. So in order to get it to diffuse, I can just add a little more water. I can drag it up. I'm using a granulating paint here. I believe this is Moon Glow. And so you can see it's starting to separate, but it makes a very interesting background. And you can go as heavy or delicate as you want. Really, our challenge here is just to define the edge of the flower, and that's going to help the white flowers pop out. So I'll kind of see what I get with drying in here. And I'll show you the other way of doing the negative painting. And that is to just go in. This is dry down here. And I can use the same paint, but I can paint just around the flowers. And I do have a pretty watery mixture here. I'll try to go in there. That's a little bit more of an example. And so here you can get a really crisp edge. So it really just depends on what effect you want when you're creating your flowers. And these, of course, like everything I do, is going to be kind of loose, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And you can vary your background. So that you get kind of an interesting background. It's not just a solid color. The whole beauty of using watercolor is that you get those blends. You could even, if you wanted to, pop in a little bit of a different color. Here I just chose a really bright green, and it's gonna kind of diffuse into the background. So this technique is like guaranteed you're going to have white flowers on a colored background. It's a no-brainer way to create white flowers. It is a little challenging when your composition is involved or more detailed. Here I just have a couple of simple flowers and I've masked off the area so we're contained, so it's pretty easy to control. But it does get kind of challenging if you have a lot going on, and you really benefit from a sketch just to keep you honest. Okay, so while the background is drying, you can move on to another area. Here, let's go ahead and do the centers of the anemone. And they have very dark centers, so I'm just going in, you know, very wet paint on dry. I'm gonna pull out some of the stems or stamens. And you can see here, because the flower is cupped, my sketch indicates the edge of the petals here. That's another great way. We're still doing negative painting. We're just doing it on the inside of the flower. So switching to a smaller brush, I can then pull some of that out. So we get those lovely little stamens. I want a little more contrast with that center, so I'm just going to go in with a little bit of black. And I do always try to add multiple colors to get some interest. This is a granulating paint, which I use often, where the center was granulating. And so it's going to have a little bit of interest on its own, but this will just give us a nice little value shift. And as it dries, of course, it's going to dry lighter, so we may have to go in and add a little more of the dark. But for now, let's go ahead and introduce some of that. So we just get a lot of nice variety. And I don't really want this to be boring, so I'm going to add some of the shadows using the shadow shaping technique, which we'll go into more details with the daisies. But here, just so you get a little bit of a preview of that. Now, as I do the third demonstration with the shadow, I'll tell you, you want a really diluted version because we don't want a lot of color here. All we're really trying to do is, you know, echo what I've done with the pencil lines, and you can pull in some of that background color, but we're really just trying to say, where do we see some of the shadows to define the contour of the flower? So we're just following along our pencil lines, maybe adding a few of the kind of veining so that each petal has a little bit of dimension. And just sort of basic principles. If something is behind, you can push it back with a little bit of the shadow, and that will make the front petal pop out. And you can go as heavy or light as you want. Try not to do too much in your first layer. You can always go back and glaze on top. So let's try to pull out some of this center, just so that everything feels integrated. And again, we're kind of mixing in a little bit of our background so we get that nice loose style. which I love. And again, here's an example. I want this to be popped off a little, so we can always do that little water technique and then go in with a little bit of darker, and that'll make this front petal pop out a little more. Okay, so we can come back and clean up this area. It looks like I got a little heavy-handed here with my wet. So I'll just define that center a little better. Okay. So same thing here. This one we can't see. It's on its side facing this direction, so we don't have that middle darkness. So we'll just add a little heavier shadowing here. So again, we get that nice pop. And just trying to add a little bit of contouring. I just follow the shape of the petal. Here, this flower is behind that flower, so let's just make this a little darker. And again, you can see how that pops. And this is all negative painting. So we're painting everything but the petal, just around it. And take advantage, we have an edge here, so let's interact with that so that we get that nice sharp definition. I can do the same thing over here. All right, so one last little bit of flowers down here. So again, just follow your pencil line and, interrupt that interaction between the background and the petal, and then recognize which petals are behind, so you know that the front petal is going to cast a bit of a shadow. So we can use that to our advantage to help the viewer understand what's going on. By having a wet brush, you can kind of pull some of the background in. The color that I chose was semi-neutral, or I would consider it neutral in this composition. So it's working well to just sort of intermingle. And you can see I'm holding my brush a little more upright, be very loose with it. If you get down here and you're way too tight and detailed, you're going to miss the kind of flowy nature. Okay, sorry, a little interruption. Getting back to it, the sun was coming in pretty brightly, so I just pulled the blind, so we're getting a weird effect here as usual, but let's just roll with it. And the flower's white, so you can add as much or little of this shadowing as you want. It's really kind of how much drama do you want to bring to the party. Again, I have a petal that's behind, and here we have behind and behind. So what I'm going to do here is just make it progressively darker. You can see I have kind of a darker tone back here, and that'll kind of bring everything together. And vary it. You don't want everything to be exactly the same. You want to take advantage, as I'm always saying, of that watercolor, get those blends working for you. So while your area is wet, you can add a little more pigment. And think about the flower. How does it grow? We have a cup here, and so we have the center. So everything is kind of pointing in. And so that's where you want to use your contouring to kind of echo the shape of the flower, and that will help your viewer understand what's happening. you know, and be a bully, push your pigment around. If you add a little bit too much, then, you know, lighten it up. And again, I like these interactions between the background, especially when you do negative painting. You can, you know, have it come in so that they seem integrated. That'll really help with the illusion. And just try to capture your blend so that they're smooth. And always look at kind of all three of your subjects. What's working, what looks a little different. This one didn't feel like I had enough. Ooh, look at that beautiful granulation though. Oh, love it. Oh, I should mention, I'm working on that Baohong paper, which, excuse me, I know people swear by. I am not a huge fan. It has a lot of texture, which of course is perfect for this. It's perfect for this exercise because I'm using granulated paints. All right. So, you know, you choose your colors, your paper, your brush sizes. That all is part of the creation of art. As this is drying, I can go in with a little bit heavier. And all I'm really doing is adding a little more pigment to the water. Or sorry, not the water, the paint blend that I had diluted. And that way, it's almost like, whoops, Charlie barked. It's almost like a pencil line. You can just go in and add a little more detail where you want it. Again, being very loose with my brush. Charlie. Charlie is concerned if you can hear the barking because we have workers in the backyard. A good blending technique or a layering is you put a little bit of pigment down, but then use water to kind of blend it and integrate it, spread it out. So then you get a softer blend. And again, the darker you make your background here, the more that petal's gonna pop. And then just kind of blend it out as you need it. Okay, I think for this, I feel like we've got the, you know, the shadows right. They feel like petals are in the right place. Then you can just kind of add the drama where you want it. So going back to my other brush, let's just pump up this area with a little more dark so that it kind of equals in here. And again, just mentioning this paper, I just feel like it's really easy to overwork. Just not a big fan. But you use what you like and that you're comfortable with. Okay. Wanted this, there we go. Just wanted a little more modeling to kind of balance that out. I'm kind of always looking for that. And if I have a taped off area, I do like to hit it with some darks just in the corners and the edges, just so that you kind of appreciate that crisp edge while we take it off. Okay, so let's just wrap this one up with a little bit of the leaf color. So I'm just going in with sort of my favorite deep sap green. And let's just introduce some of where the stems would be. And these can be really messy and loose. We're really just trying to get that down. And let's, just for variety, just kind of add some very loose. I'm just kind of rolling my brush around just to suggest that there's more leaves and activity down here. We're not trying to draw or paint leaf shapes in this painting. We're just trying to show, hey, there's some action here from the stems. And I think that'll dry nicely. Just some variation, just so that we show kind of the direction. Okay, let's let that dry. As I say that, and I go back and I add a little more. Okay, I like it. Okay, lifting, our next technique. So here, I did a similar video with some lilies. And you could really use any of the techniques I'm showing you for any of the flowers. I just wanted to give you a variety so that if you're painting something, you could say, hey, I can relate to that. So let's wet the entire area here because we want a nice even wash. And it doesn't have to be soaking because we don't want it to take forever to dry, but we just want some nice blends. And let's use a really nice blending, which this will be a non-granulating. I'm going to go in with my Phthalo Blue red shade. And let's just put some blue. You can move in both directions as long as it's wet. You really just want a nice even wash. I end up using my whole arm and I don't want to go over to my daisy area. And when I do a wash, I try to think again compositionally. I know this is just an exercise, but I don't want everything exactly the same. I want to, again, appreciate the beauty of the watercolor. And so I'm going to go a little heavier at the top with the color. And I'm going to complain about this paper because I don't like how it spreads. It's crunchy feeling. But I'd be interested if you love this paper like many do, please, please let me know because I don't know if I'm just doing something wrong. I'm just not a huge fan. Okay. Okay, so now let's go ahead and add the lily pads. So they tend to be darker in the middle, and you can see this pigment. This is, again, my deep sap green. It really pushes out, which is kind of fun. We can use that to our advantage of creating the lily pads because they'll be more condensed in the middle, and then it'll kind of span out. And the same principle with, and here, oh, I should mention, I've defined where I'm going to put the lily, but I'm not worrying at all about negative edges because we're going to use our brush to lift off the areas we don't want. And it is a delicate balance of when do you add the edges. And so let's pull out some of that. They kind of are heart-shaped. So we have the center point and then goes around. And while I could be varying my green a lot more in here, I'm just sort of blending the blue in with it because really the story is going to be all about the lilies. Okay, so good enough. Just suggest there's some lily pads back here. They're blending in with the water. You could have some fun and splatter a little bit. just to give the pond kind of some interest. Okay. Actually, just for fun, let's introduce a little bit of the green gold in this front. That'll make this one pop up because the cooler colors will tend to recede. We know there's variations in nature. Okay. All right, so now this brush would be fine for lifting, but it does hold a lot of water and it's pretty flexible. So I'm going to switch to a really tight brush. This one has a lot of snap. It's my number 8 filbert. And so what you want to do here is I'm going into my clean water, got it very wet, and I'm going to have a paper towel at the ready. And so here what I'm doing is I'm just going to lift off the pigment. So each time I'm pulling off the paint with the water and then brushing it off. And you can also, another way to lift is to actually use the paper towel to dab off. So if you want more, a lot of your choices are just going to depend on how fast did you move. I could tell I wasn't getting as much of a lift as I would have liked because the paint, depending on the dryness. But what I do like about this technique is you can, just like we did over here with the shading, you can pull in your background so that it feels like a shadow, like a reflection. So the fact that this is lilies and water, it's really awesome. So mentioning that V shape, you can see on my sketch, or maybe you can, I have a V right here. The reason for that is, again, with the direction. Where are the petals coming from and how do I want them to move in so that the illusion is correct? So this one in the front is flatter, and then, we get these other guys. So, okay, so let's add a bit of our center color. So we'll go in with the Hansa Yellow medium. And we just want really impressionistic kind of brush marks. And you can pick 2 or 3 colors just to add more dimension. Sorry, that was raw sienna light. This is my Hansa Yellow medium. And lilies are several colors. Because this exercise is white colors, we're going with the white. I used a bit of my background to pull in a little, but we're going to go back on top, similar to how we did here with a little dimension. The point of this second of 3 exercises is to show you how to lift. So you can either lift with the brush, removing the area, or go in with a paper towel or something to blot off the paint you want. But I love this little soft edge. We can also use a little bit of negative painting if we want to define a few areas. So what I would do there is just pick a contrasting color and hit it. I love doing it when it's wet because it does kind of the work for you, but you can then just, again, make it pop off and show a little more of the shape that you want. And then same as I did here, I'm trying to integrate my background with the subject. And so I can just use a little bit of that and pull it in. And again, do as much or little as that as you like. I think my strength is probably more in drawing than painting, although I am enjoying the painting process. So I tend to do I do too much of the lines where I need to just let the brush and the the paint kind of do the job for me. Here, let's just kind of offset this bottom a little bit. And you don't have to use the greenish and the bluish tones for your shadowing. I just like the fact that it feels like it's somewhat reflected, which of course it would do on the water. All right, I promise I'll stop complaining about this paper. I just, it's really easy to feel overworked. So, sometimes you think it's a flaw of yourself, but really it's how are you using the materials you have? If you're not using 100% cotton paper, how is the paper behaving? Typically there's a shadow from the flower, so I'm just adding a little bit. And I'm not looking at any reference photo here, so we're just kind of making things up as we go, just kind of from experience. Again, same thing I did over here. I just really want to create a little more interest in that background with some value shifts. Okay. We might have to come back and look at this one to see, do we have enough value changes in it? For now, I just want to let it dry and see what we come up with. Okay. For our last one, I'm going to use daisies, and we're going to do shadow shaping, or really we're going to paint the shadows of the flowers. And I'm not going to do this one on a background since we already have the negative painting example. So here, we're just going to do some pretty simple little, let's start. I've defined where I wanted my centers. So I'm just going to do a few spots, again, making them irregular. And you can go in with a little bit of kind of any brown that you want and just give the edges a pop. This is great for doing sunflowers as well. Whoops. If you get a little carried away, just remember your lifting technique. You can lift off that center to make it a little highlighted, or add a little bit of the cool yellow. All right. Okay, that'll work just fine. So now what I've done is I've taken a mixture of my French ultramarine and sepia, and I've made a very diluted combination. I can share that here, and this is what I'm using here. Sorry, I had some extra paints on my palette I didn't want to waste. So what we're going to do here is this daisy is going to be facing somewhat upward. So we're just going to use a little bit, tiny, these are very small. We're just going to pull up a little bit of the color. If you get too yellow, don't worry, just come in from the top and add your petals. So you're really just putting the brush down, get the belly, and then you can, just think about where would the shadows be happening, and they're just very loose. So you're getting petal shapes, and sorry that shadow is probably making this a little difficult to see. Hopefully it'll come out all right. But here again, we're just using the shape of the brush, and we're just pulling out some of those petals. So for layer one, we're really just which direction is the flower going. And if you get a little too heavy, like I did, just pull some of it out. And you can decide how cool or warm do you want your shadows to be, depending on which colors you mix. You just want any neutral. Some people use dirty water. That also works, just so that you have just enough to kind of show there's something going on there. And they're pretty striated, so that's another thing. You just get where it's close to the middle might be heavier, and as you pull it out, there's less water. And you can go in on your next layer and add a very fine line, which we'll do. Kind of fun how the water escapes into the petal. So if you start at the top and do less of that, it won't be as yellow. But I love it. Again, it just feels like sunlight reflecting, which I think is a great technique. But see here, I started from the outside without touching that wet. You can also let your centers dry a little more. And here you can see, same as the other flowers, which direction. I've got one going this way, and this one is somewhat open. So everything's kind of the same. And depending on how realistic you want, I love a really loose floral and loose way of painting. So just suggesting the direction of the petals to me is fun. But you do you, and add as many details as you want. If it gets dark, just blend it in a little bit like I did there. And nature isn't perfect, so if your painting isn't, it just will look even more realistic. Okay, so as this one's drying, I can decide, oh, it's still a little wet. Where do I want a little more of the shadow shaping to happen? And I'm going to choose to do it in the center, where it's deeper in, which would cause more shadowing. This brush is kind of nice because not only do you get the end of the petal if you wanted to use it to get the tips, but you can see how skinny it is so that you can use it for very precise details, which I love. All right, while those are drying, before I give it a final look, let's go ahead and just add our stems. Whoa, a little bit. I'm gonna switch brushes here and go to my round, which is okay. Let me just spread some of this out. Try not to panic if you make a mistake like I do, and you can always just do it or dab it up. And of course, daisies have these cool little fringy sort of flowers, so it's perfect for loose style. Adds a little bit of interest to the bottom. And you can always do some light and some dark greens just for, again, that sort of value interest. I guess their leaves are kind of shaggy. That would be a good description of them. More concentrated at the bottom of the plant. I always feel like as the stem goes into a flower, it should be sort of darker at that base too, but I don't know that that's technically accurate, but it always feels like it's where the flower comes alive. Everything's feeling kind of the same shade, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Sepia, and I'm going to actually use my smallest brush. And I'm just going to go into the base here. The trick, I think, with watercolor is it always dries lighter than you plan. And if you don't kind of continually look at it, you miss out on that sort of opportunity to get those values. So here, just concentrating on defining kind of where does the petal come away from the middle. I think that makes a nice contrast. And then with that, you can maybe just take a few of the petals and just give them a little bit of an edge, and that'll really let people know what's happening here. Oh, right, it's daisy, and the shape of those is somewhat defined in just a few areas, maybe not everywhere. Another little trick is if you're doing a full composition, you can think about where do you want your focal point. Maybe it was this flower and then these have a lot less detail and you can put a lot more attention here, but we're kind of small here. But all right, I'm happy with that. So let me just go back and revisit my lily here. It needs a little bit of that dimension as well. And I don't want to use any more of the green or that blue, so I'm going to just stay neutral. In fact, I'm going to borrow some of the shadow color I've used from here and just go in. And I'm just trying to define that. They have that very specific ovally kind of shape to them. So I'm just going to add a little bit. Here's where you have to be brave. Like, is it done? Have I made the point? Or what I'm adding helping or hurting? And that's kind of how you know something is finished. But I think it is important to show contour and the direction something is moving, even if you don't have a lot of detail. So that helps. And then maybe just a final value. And just blend it out. I felt like I had a couple of hot spots in there. So. Just trying to kiss those dark areas so that they sort of softly blend into the outside. So there you have it. 3 ways to paint white flowers: negative painting, lifting, and shadow shaping. Let me know which technique you're excited to try, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more watercolor tips.